The manufactured famine. From the ancient era of disturbance to the modern weapon of mass destruction. The failure of captured science and the principles of natural intelligence. Abstract. This paper presents a systemic critique of the dominant global agricultural paradigm. We argue that modern agricultural science has largely abandoned the fundamental scientific method of observation and emulation in favor of a model of motivated or captured science, research designed and funded to validate and expand the sale of external inputs rather than to understand ecosystems. The outcomes constitute a sevenfold bankruptcy: ecological, nutritional, economic, health, knowledge, social, and moral. We dismantle the central demographic pretext for this system, demonstrating it increased commodity tonnage, not nutrition, while exacerbating poverty and food insecurity. The analysis establishes that any agriculture violating core principles of natural ecosystems, namely, soil inundation, tillage disturbance, and bare soil, is inherently unsustainable. Finally, we identify that the corrective path forward lies not in future techno-fixes, but in a return to the science of natural intelligence, a paradigm for which validated, scalable proof of concepts already exist. The logical policy conclusion is a decisive reorientation of support from the failing captured model to systems adhering to natural principles. Introduction: a foundational paradox of method. Humanity's greatest innovations have stemmed from humble observation of nature. Aeronautics began with the study of birds, materials science with biomimicry. This pattern of observation, understanding, emulation, adaptation is the bedrock of applied science. Agriculture represents the stark, catastrophic exception. Faced with the challenge of food production, the 20th century scientific establishment did not first ask, how do undisturbed, climax ecosystems produce perennial abundance without inputs? Instead, inquiry was directed by a commercial motivation: how can we increase the marketable yield of select crops using products we can sell? This inversion marked the genesis of captured science, a body of knowledge developed to service a supply chain, not to understand a complex system. This paper traces the consequences of this error and outlines the principles for its correction. Historical context: the original error. The roots of the crisis predate industrial chemistry. For over 400 million years, a decentralized, self-sustaining biological production system thrived. Early Homo sapiens, motivated more by fear of foraging risks than by scarcity, initiated a fateful intervention, burying seeds for convenience and protection. This act of soil disturbance was the genesis of tillage agriculture, a system born not from ecological understanding, but from a desire for control, declaring a war on nature's design that continues today. The industrial era merely mechanized and intensified this original error. The accelerated decline: the era of captured science. The post-World War II period catalyzed a systemic capture. Corporations with surplus chemical and mechanical capacity targeted agriculture, adopting a business model that required a broken system. Tillage had already compromised soil function. Their products promised management of the ensuing crises. Public research was co-opted into this model. Funded by input supply companies, it largely ceased to be a discipline of open inquiry and became a validation apparatus for predetermined products. Research topics, methodologies, and desired outcomes were often aligned with commercial interests. The result was not a science of ecosystems, but a motivated science that created a self-justifying literature for a chemistry-driven extraction system, replacing a 400-million-year-old biological production model with a sterile dependency. The audit of failure: a sevenfold bankruptcy. The outcomes of this paradigm are measurable and interlinked. Ecological bankruptcy: degraded soils, eutrophied and poisoned waterways, collapsed biodiversity, and compromised climate resilience. Nutritional bankruptcy: a documented decline in the vitamin, mineral, and phytonutrient density of crops, producing hollow food. Economic bankruptcy: farmers trapped in input cost debt cycles, Consumers facing rising prices for inferior quality, wealth extracted from rural communities. Health bankruptcy, epidemics of metabolic and chronic disease correlating strongly with degraded food quality and novel chemical exposures. Knowledge bankruptcy, the erosion of place-based, ecological farming knowledge, replaced by prescriptive, input-dependent advice. Social bankruptcy, the disintegration of rural communities and cultural heritage linked to land stewardship. Moral bankruptcy, the externalization of destruction, where success is measured in short-term yield and profit, ignoring systemic costs. Demolishing the central pretext, the feed the world myth. The paradigm's primary defense is its claimed necessity to feed a growing population. This pretext does not withstand scrutiny. Tonnage versus nutrition, it increased tonnage per hectare, not nutrition per hectare, prioritizing calories over nutrient density. The hunger paradox, persistent hunger and malnutrition are problems of poverty, access, and distribution, issues exacerbated by an agricultural model that increases farmer debt and consolidates control. The illusion of success, yield plateaus, diminishing returns on inputs, and the desperate pursuit of increasingly complex techno-fixes, e.g., GMOs, lab-grown food, are hallmarks of a failing, not a succeeding, system. The foundational principles, a litmus test for true natural systems agriculture. To correct course, a clear scientific standard must be established. Derived from the observation of resilient, self-sustaining ecosystems, we posit that any agricultural system that relies on soil inundation, employs tillage-based soil disturbance, or leaves soil bare without permanent organic cover is operating in fundamental opposition to natural ecosystem principles and is therefore inherently unsustainable. This axiom provides a clear filter to separate practices that work with natural systems from those that work against them. Fundamental Principles of Natural Ecosystem, PQNK. 1. No inundation of soil with water. 2. No disturbance of soil with tillage. 3. No agrochemicals, nor any biological inputs. 4. Soil moisture management, SMM, natural supply system. 5. Constant soil coverage with live or dead organic mulch. 6. Living roots. 7. Biodiversity. 8. Animal impact for grazing and spreading the microbes. 9. Plant spacing, pruning and canopy management. Proof of concept, validated principles in practice. The principles above are not theoretical. They have been operationalized into scalable production systems through decades of transitional research aimed solely at understanding and emulating natural ecosystem processes for agriculture. One such proof of concept is the PQNK, Pristine Organic Farming, system. It was developed through over 50 years of research concluding in a model that intentionally adheres to the natural principles outlined in Section 6, zero tillage, permanent organic mulch, and no soil inundation, relying on atmospheric moisture. The development included engineering specialized machinery to enable scalability. Empirical evidence from its adoption across diverse geographies indicates outcomes consistent with theoretical predictions for a natural systems model. Ecological regeneration, documented improvements in soil organic matter, water infiltration, aquifer recharge, and local biodiversity. Economic rationality, significant reduction in production costs, primarily via input elimination, and increased net income for adopting farmers. Nutritional output. Data suggests crops produced under this system exhibit higher nutrient density markers. Scalability. Adoption by hundreds of thousands of farmers demonstrates practical viability across scales and topographies. The significance of PQNK is not as a singular solution, but as an existence proof. It demonstrates that a production agriculture based strictly on natural ecosystem science is not only possible but is already operational, providing a validated template that satisfies the litmus test and delivers against the multiple failures of the captured paradigm. The logical policy imperative, redirecting support from failure to principle. Given the documented systemic failures of the captured science model and the existence of validated, principle-based alternatives, the rational policy pathway is clear. Redirect public research funding. The critical need is no longer for foundational research. The science of natural ecosystem emulation and agroecology is mature, proven, and already practiced by hundreds of thousands of farmers worldwide, with specifically designed machinery field tested and in active use. Therefore, public funding must be strategically redirected from primary research to enabling mass adoption. This requires a comprehensive national initiative for 1. Mass awareness campaigns at all societal levels, 2. Extensive farmer education, training, and the creation of showcase learning farms, 3. Subsidies for proven adoptive machinery and transition costs, 4. The reform of university agricultural curricula to reflect this proven systems-based science, and 5. Sustained multimedia public communication. The priority is to divorce policy from input supply chain influence and directly empower the replication of this ready, resilient model. Redefine success metrics. Replace yield per hectare with multidimensional metrics, nutritional yield per hectare, soil health index, water balance impact, and farmer livelihood viability. Support the transition. Create knowledge networks, financial incentives, and market structures to support farmers in transitioning from input-dependent to knowledge-dependent, principle-based regenerative models. Reform agricultural education. Overhaul curricula to be grounded in ecology, systems thinking, and the science of natural ecosystem processes, restoring independence to academic institutions. Conclusion. The current agricultural paradigm is the result of a profound scientific error, the replacement of observation and emulation with motivation and capture. Its consequences are a civilizational scale crisis. The corrective principles, however, are evident in the natural world and have already been successfully translated into practical farming systems. We flew by observing birds. We must now learn to feed ourselves by observing the forest. The evidence is conclusive, the validated models exist. The choice is no longer one of possibility, but of will. The policy mandate is to cease investing in the architecture of failure and to build decisively upon the proven principles of natural intelligence. Author note: this paper synthesizes historical analysis, systemic critique, and empirical agronomy to argue for a foundational shift in perspective. It treats existing alternative systems not as marketed products, but as critical evidence that the proposed principles are viable, moving the debate from if to how. Footnote: PQNK, pronounced picnic. The regenerative and sustainable pristine organic farming system is grounded in natural ecosystem science. This science employs perennial biodiversity, protects soil with organic mulch, and avoids practices like water inundation, tillage disturbance, and leaving soil bare. It is the process that matters most. PQNK is a pristine production system designed not merely for yield, but for optimal, balanced output, where quality, sustainability, and ecological harmony emerge from a self-regulated, zero external input methodology.